reason for that? Is it because of a different metal or plastic?
It's a different type of material. And there's a difference between this and regular car fires. Look at the windshield, or where the windshield was. Everything is gone, almost like it was wire brushed ready for a paint job, all around the lip of where the windshield goes.
Yeah, because if there is a burned out car, I mean, the rubber around the glass would turn into a sort of glue, wouldn't it, and look like a sticky mass.
And you'd have fragments of glass here and there. You wouldn't have 100% of the glass missing.
Okay, let's look at the next one. And
also, notice in that picture, you have trees with leaves on them in the background.
Okay.
Everything on all the cars were toasted, but none of the trees were.
Okay. Now, this is some other, you know, Hutchison type effect, if you like. Do you want to describe this one, the windows?
You have double paned windows where only the outer pane is broken. And the inner pane and outer pane have different breakage patterns. If you throw a baseball through a window, you get a spiderweb pattern, you know, starburst kind of breakage pattern. You don't also get round holes. We have round holes in some of them. But the fact that you have outer pane broken and not the inner pane needs some explaining.
Okay, all right. Let's look at the Bankers Trust building. The next one is quite interesting, isn't it? This is number 50. This is the building that was opposite the World Trade Center, and it had a big hole carved in it somehow. Do you want to talk about this, Judy?
Yeah, it's missing material there. It's got this big void in it. And that wheat check's hanging there. It couldn't have done it. It's you know, straight as an arrow. It's not scratched or done up, or, you know, he couldn't have carved that big hole.
And yet this building, this is the Bankers Trust building, isn't it? This was repaired after 9/11 and then demolished.
Yes.
What, do you know why it was demolished?
They said it was infected.
With what?
A steel frame building is infected.
With a mold infection. That was the official explanation. You
know, I think we should show your film of Andrew, that you took it in 2008. Can we see the film we added last of all of the hosing down of? This is a very recent film at the start of 2008 of them hosing down the 9/11 site, the World Trade Center site, even today. You want to describe this, Andrew?
Yeah, well, this was actually taken from the Burger King upstairs on Liberty Street, and we just happened to go, and we were trying to film the site, but they had all fences around it, so we couldn't really film much. And then just as lo and behold, as we're sitting down to have a bite to eat on this cold day in January, this was the 17th of January 2008, I took this video. We can see this guy hosing down this, I don't know whether it's a cable or some other type of pipe. So why is he hosing that down? I mean, why do you need to hose it down like that and give it such a good wash? You know, it didn't really make any sense to me.
And they're still hosing down the site?
Yeah, well, while we're there, they're hosing down the entrance to the site, and they were hosing down the wheels of the trucks as they entered and left the site.
And isn't it the case that they're also bringing in soil in?
Yeah, they were actually bringing in trucks of what looked like soil or potting compost into the complex, and I didn't see them taking the trucks in when I was there, but I saw them coming out full of this, you know, sort of muddy, soily material.
Can we go to number 60? Oh, Judy, I think we've lost you there. Can we go to number 60?
Yeah.
Image 60, please. Here we go. What are you seeing in this then?
As they started taking the building apart, Bankers Trust, they got down to the area where it had been repaired.
Yeah.
And hang on, I got a cough.
Yeah, so basically you can see the actually, if you look closely in this picture, you can see the sort of potting compost actually placed on top of the, you know, there's actually a fire truck here somewhere, and that's got potting soil on it. They've got bits of rubbish in here.
And the next one, let's look at the next image.
Yeah, and here you can see there's actually soil on top of the debris. So how did this sort of soil or landfill type material get on top of the debris? And was the World Trade Center full of soil?
And the next one?
And this was September 2007, as you can see from the caption. And, you know, where is this dirt?
Scooping up what looks like topsoil.
Topsoil.
And then in the next picture, in 63, we've got 4 big trucks. What are they carrying here?
They're actually carrying a soil-type material again. And this was, I think...
This was a week later, a week after 9/11, and they're just north of the World Trade Center complex.
And what are they doing? Let's look at the next image as well. What are they doing then? Are you suggesting, and I know you are suggesting this, so I'm going to say it for you, that they're bringing in soil, spreading it around, and taking it out as though it was some kind of decontamination? Is that correct?
Just look at the truck, not the green one, but all the other ones in front. They look like nice rounded bread loaves in the back of each of those trucks of soil, brown soil.
So
why would they be taking out soil like that?
So are you saying then that this effect, if it is the Hutchison effect, and I think I should say here that John Hutchison is a Canadian who would have been on this show but unfortunately can't be tonight, but he's an independent scientist. And we've seen some of his effects. We do have a couple of films. I don't know whether we're going to have time to show them, but they're all available on his website and on other websites, and you can find those on the edgemediatv.com forum. They're all listed there on this subject. Sorry, just to get back to the topic here, then, this is an ongoing problem. There is some kind of contamination of the site. Is this what you're saying, Judy?
Yes, and recall, I had categorized all of the evidence before I found the Hutchison effect. And one of the first things that grabbed me of the Hutchison effect was a statement someone made about if it's too large of a mass that is activated, it may not be self-quenching. It may be an ongoing effect that gets started.
One of the effects is rusting, isn't it?
Yes. Instant rust.
Let's go to the next image, 65, please. Okay. Judy, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, on the left, that's a FEMA image taken, and you get pipes that are uniform colored in rust, orange rust. Steel does not rust like that. Steel gets creeping crowd out, all sorts of different things over a long period of time.
And the next
only
image?
thing I know of that rusts like that is iron. Like you take an iron skillet, leave it in your sink with water standing in it, it'll rust like that.
Okay, let's look at the next image, 66, please. Perhaps, Andrew, you want to talk about this for a moment?
Yeah, so it looks like here, you know, as I've put in the caption, you've got instant rusting. You know, does fire cause instant rust? We've got these clouds of rust, it looks like.
Clouds of orange, it does look like rust. Could it not be thermite? Which is made of rust.
Well, if it was thermite, I think the people who are, you know, the diggers that are working there just wouldn't be there because they wouldn't work. So, you know, the thermite doesn't explain anything. Well,
there's a good one, and I think we'll go to number 68. Can we get a picture 68? Let's skip one. This is the Bankers Trust building being taken apart. And Judy, I mean, what do you see here?
And this is the area where they repaired it with that big gash in it. They repaired it. And then now they're taking it apart, and it looks like the steel where they replaced it has been at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're a professor of mechanical engineering. Would you expect to see this kind of rusting in a building of this type?
No.
What, never, ever?
No. Steel is made of various properties in it that enhance its structural properties and its rust-resistant properties.
And the next one, the next image?
So you've got, more rusty beams.
Where is this? Is this Bankers Trust building again?
Correct.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, let's look at some more sort of Hutchison effect type things. Let's look at number 71. This is a firefighter walking through the fire, but apparently not on fire.
Yeah.
And neither is the paper.
So it seems like the Hutchison effect doesn't affect paper, and yet it apparently affects lots of other things, but usually metal things?
Primarily, yes.
Here's something that we all know about is a microwave oven. You put a dry paper towel in there and put your coffee mug on it. The paper towel does not cook.
That's because it's not oily or wet, is that right?
Correct, because that particular energy, microwave, resonates the water molecules, not paper. So different energy affects different materials differently.
Is it because metal is conductive of both heat and...
It's for different reasons, really. I mean, the frequency of the microwaves is resonant with something to do with the water molecule and also with molecules that are in fats and this sort of thing. So the microwave causes the molecule to vibrate, which generates the heat in the material.
Doesn't John Hutchison, to get his effect, use like sort of cross beams of radar energy and microwave energy?
He does, yes. But it also depends on the power and the frequency as to which, particular frequencies he uses to generate particular effects that he does. And I mean, we really need him here to, sort of elaborate on that some more.
But sadly not. But all available on his website. Once again, if you want to go to our website, which is edgemediatv.com, go to the forum and go to the On the Edge subject, you'll see tonight's show, and all the websites are listed, and you can, there it is on screen.
And I'd just like to add, with the fires there, we're looking at, you'd look at that picture and you'd think that it's just an ordinary fire. But if it was an ordinary fire, then again, why is the fireman apparently walking through it? And why isn't the paper, just a whole mass of burning paper? I mean, the fire should spread from one piece to another in dry conditions. OK, let me see if I've got some interesting texts here. I'm afraid P. Nesshead in Aberdeen says, I'm an open-minded guy, but this sounds utterly insane. I mean, I know you're fighting this kind of criticism. I mean, Andrew, you must have people saying this. Well, I mean, I think it's one thing to say this sounds insane, but what I would challenge anyone to do is explain this evidence. If you are saying that what we're putting on the table is not the correct explanation, in other words, that explanation being that the World Trade Center was destroyed using some type of undisclosed weaponry, which uses a technology which is similar to what John Hutchison has developed, then you have to come up with another explanation. And all the other explanations that I've come across do not explain this evidence. Well, it's Jeff, as simple as that. Somebody called Jeff says, rust can appear in hours. Look at your brake discs after the rain. Well, I don't think brake discs are made out of steel. And as far as we know, there weren't the World Trade Center, things near the World Trade Center weren't being used as brakes when the event happened. I mean, if I can make that fairly obvious observation, I think that answers that question. OK. We did have a text that scrolled off the screen now, which said something like, God help us if the powers that be have got this technology, because we're 10 years down the line now. I mean, but where else are they using it? Where has it been used? Has it been used anywhere else? If you're saying there's directed energy weapons, I mean, let's get Judy to answer this. Judy, is this technology being used? Have you got evidence of it being used anywhere else? There are other odd events. There's one particular one I observed in 2007. On the 1st of August, the Minnesota Bridge, it supposedly was closed down for repair, so it had less traffic on it. Half the bridge was closed, so it had half the load it normally has. Suddenly, a dozen supports suddenly failed at the exact same moment, and the roadway went down horizontally, so the cars rode the bridge down, and when it landed in the riverbed, people got out of the cars and stood there on the bridge. It makes no sense through physics, but also all of the other hallmarks that we saw on 9/11, the fuming, the weird fires, the list goes on. Okay, now, all right, now I know you have taken some legal action, because you're not just talking about this, you have actually taken some legal action. You've done something called a key tam. Do you want to describe this, please, Judy? Yes, the key tam case is called a whistleblower case. My act of whistleblowing was my request for correction I filed with NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, notifying them that the contractors they hired to help with their report were manufacturers and developers of directed energy weapons, and also were contracted to know everything about any weapon of mass destruction that existed on the planet or off the planet. So they would know what they were looking at. And that's a conflict of interest, for one thing. Another thing is, some of the contractors had actually tested a mock-up of an entire floor of the building,
and put it on fire for twice as long, at twice as high of temperature, and they could not get it to fail. Yet they signed a report stating that fire caused it.
So your legal action, which was what, in the High Court in America, is that the equivalent of
Supreme Court?
Supreme Court. Actually went to the Supreme Court. Was to ask for a correction to the NIST report on what happened. Is that
No, my request for correction to the NIST report was my act of whistleblowing, was notifying a government agency of the fraud that had been, the science fraud that was in that report, and the involvement of the contractors. The Key-Tem case was against the contractors.
And anyone in America is allowed to do that, aren't they?
Yes, as citizens to file these charges. The Key-Tem case allows there to be checks and balances, supposedly, that these companies were defrauding the American people. American taxpayers paid for the NIST investigation. Instead, they got a reported science fraud. So therefore, we want our money back.
Okay, so you brought this case. It went eventually to the Supreme Court. What happened?
It went to the first court, dismissed it based on stuff that was not in the report. He said he was not going to hear a case on who shot JFK or what landed on the moon. My case isn't about those. He, didn't read any of the evidence. It was a very poorly written decision. We appealed it to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, meanwhile, a law had changed that made it easier for my case to go forward. And it was such a good change in the law, it was for accountability, that the judges had to ignore the law in order to dismiss the case, and they actually stated that in the write-up. They stated for the ease of preparing this dismissal, they were going to ignore that law. And so
they ignored the current law.
Yes, it's called the FERA Act. Yes.
So they made a decision based on a law that was no longer the law. Is that what
well, essentially, the law was enhanced, but they said we're going to ignore the enhancement in ruling on this case. And they actually said that in the ruling.
Well, I probably shouldn't ask you this, but Judy, is this legal in America?
No, and what this shows is that we're no longer a country based on laws.
And that was the basis on which to send the case to the Supreme Court, was that the appeals court ignored the change in the law in order to make their ruling. And the evidence has never really, the evidence that we've described has not been discussed in a legal, situation. It's never been, put before a jury. So
where are you now with it then, Judy?
It's dead. It's ended. What this law is that for a government agency, for contractors to knowingly allow fraudulent evidence or fraudulent data to be put forward into a report, they are held accountable. And I had absolute proof that these contractors knew they were allowing fraudulent data to move forward.
So where can you go now then? Can you not appeal again?
No, that's it. The United States Supreme Court is as high up as you go. And that was our chance. For people who wanted to expose 9/11, that was the opportunity. And the quote truth movement, for whatever reason, decided to sweep that under the carpet. They do not want, truth and justice.
I think it's very worthwhile pointing that out, that this court case has been in progress since 2007, and yet I've asked people who talk about 9/11 at these various events and talks, I've asked people to mention the court case to raise awareness of it, and they refused, point blank refused.
Oh, well, I can see you're angry about it.
Yes, well, I think because one thing we haven't really touched on is why this is important. I mean, we don't just do this for entertainment. We don't just do this because, we think it's fun. This is one of the most crucial matters that's set before humanity, because what we have proved with this evidence tonight is that the towers disappeared in a very unconventional manner, without any heat, without any real explosions as such, not in the conventional sense anyway. So we're looking at a new type of technology. It was used in broad daylight. It was orchestrated. and it's based on the principles of what we call free energy. In other words, the principles...
Well, 0 point energy.
Something like that. You know, it goes under various names: orgone energy, 0 point energy, vacuum energy, you know, all these names. But it uses some other type of technology which can, you know, change that material into dust. And what we, you know, would say is that this technology can be used for other purposes. This technology, we now know it exists. We know it exists because the towers are no longer there, right? So that's why it's important. And people say, well, why is this important? Isn't it just a conspiracy theory? The reason why it's important is within that technology is a secret to completely transform our modern world, okay? We don't need fossil fuel, that's a con. If somebody can modify the weather, this is what I tell people. Somebody moved that hurricane and put it there, you know, for a reason. People can say it's a coincidence if they want, that's absolutely fine. But taken together with the field effect evidence, if you look at the weather data in more detail, which Dr. Wood has put on her website, and you can look at things like the barometric pressure and all that kind of thing, somebody can do weather control. So all this, you know, talk of a sideshow of this Hadley CRU fraud that everyone's been talking about, and of course the BBC hasn't, this is all just a sideshow because somebody out there has the technology to do these things.
Andrew, that is all we have got time for. Thank you to everyone for watching our special 2-hour show, and for those who texted, and thanks to my very special guests, Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Wood. If you want more information, why not visit the Edge Media forum page for this show at edgemediatv.com, where all our guest websites are listed. Next week, we'll be back with yet another exciting show that might even change your life. Until then, remember, they're watching you, watching us, watching them. Cheerio.
street, and I picked up the camera just out of habit. And something in the back of my mind said, run, run, run. And never in 20 years of shooting in New York have I run from an assignment. But something in the back of my head just said, run. And as I hit the corner of Liberty Street, it was almost being picked up by a tornado, almost being picked up by
a wave.
It was like being picked up.
But the black cloud.
That black cloud had substance. It was like night, but it had a solid feel to it. It was like gravel, hot gravel, and just picked me up and tossed me about a block. At one second I was running, and the next second I was airborne. And I lost my glasses, I lost my cell phone, I lost my pager, but managed to hold on to both cameras.
But it threw you for a block?
I was back down at Ground Zero last week and walked the area where I have a pretty good recollection of where I was and where I wound up, and it was just under a city block.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building that was...
You were picked up off the ground?
Physically picked up off the ground.